Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and we are back for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of the Gold Standard and Iowa Conservative Podcast. You have John Hendrickson and myself here today. Hope you're doing well. As a reminder, I've been meaning to try and do this on the front end, John. As a reminder, you can find the ITR Live podcast pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts across the internet, but we are on video. We got a lot of people that aren't on YouTube yet or Rumble or whatever your preferred platform is. So make sure you get on that, right, John?
That's right.
Because you can actually see our smiling faces and know that we're actually kind of enjoying this. So,
that's right.
So it's good. All right. Well, it is Friday morning in Iowa, and there is still a lot going on. We've got the state legislative session is in full swing, or sort of half swing maybe sometimes, as the case may be. And we've got polling results about an election coming up. We had President Biden giving the State of the Union address last night, which I did not watch a single minute of, and I felt really good about that. But all that having been said, we will obviously we still have opinions on that, right?
Yes,
we still have hot takes coming in, but don't have to actually watch it. So anyway, where should we start today, John? Let's do this. Let's start with a quick legislative update, because the one thing that I think we're becoming the most excited, not the most excited about, very excited about, are these constitutional amendment, or the one resolution with two constitutional amendments, and remind the folks exactly what's in that resolution with those two amendments.
Yes, yeah. So it does two things. The first would require a 2/3 majority to raise income taxes, 2/3 majority of both houses, the legislature.
Now, the term that's used a lot for that is a supermajority, which we don't use a lot in Iowa because there aren't many things constitutionally that are required by that, the way they are maybe in some other states.
Yes, yeah.
So, okay, anyway, so supermajority, 2/3, however you want to think about it.
Yeah, and then the second amendment would basically constitutionally protect the flat tax. So you would just have a single flat income tax. You can't go back to a progressive income tax.
It's not prescriptive of what that rate shall be.
No,
it just says that it shall be flat.
Yes, single rate.
Yeah,
yep.
Which would be tremendous.
And there's been a lot of I would say debate going on about the 2/3 majority or supermajority, and this is not something unusual. There's several states that have this, both what you'd call red Republican states as well as some blue progressive states that have these requirements. So they're not. There was one article I saw where some liberal activist was saying that a supermajority requirement is an attack on democracy, and I think that's just nonsense.
Well, of course it's nonsense, John. They are trying to lean in. What's going on there is they got the memo from the Biden campaign.
Yes, yeah.
Is that the only thing they have is this strange threats to democracy idea. That's the only thing they can run on.
Yeah,
and maybe sprinkle in a little bit of abortion in there too, because on the issues of the day, the practical kitchen table issues, the things that people are actually talking about, they're losing all of them.
Yeah.
So they're trying to lean into this threats to democracy garbage, which we've unpacked in the past.
I wouldn't be surprised if they start saying that if you support the flat tax or these amendments that you're a puppet of Putin.
Well,
I'm sure that's coming next.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, I think that is coming. I think you can count on it, John. I've had this debate in my own mind on the 2/3. I strongly support it. I think it's a great move. But it does empower the minority. But so because if it gives the minority power.
Yes, yeah.
Well, okay, but power to do what? The only power you're giving the minority is the power to stop tax increase, which is a good thing.
Yes, yeah.
So, yes, we'd love to see these. So these are now passed subcommittee and committee.
Yes, on the Senate side.
Yeah, on the Senate side. It has passed subcommittee, and
it's passed subcommittee this week in the House, and then I just heard an update this morning, and I think they'll take it up in full committee next week. Yeah.
And then then those would be not immediately eligible for debate, but very soon thereafter, three calendar days in the House. They calculate it differently in the Senate. So we're within at least a week or so of those being eligible for floor debate.
Yes. Yep.
Already eligible for floor debate.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned before, those do not go to the governor.
Mm.
They have to have matching versions of the bill. They have to, one side or the other has to pass the other's bill, and not getting too deep into parliamentary and legislative procedure. But yeah, anyway, so those be coming. But the key thing is it does not need the governor's signature. So that's happening. We're still looking forward to jumpstarting the income tax conversation. It seems like that is, I wouldn't say it's on pause. I know that both the House and the Senate, the governor, are having conversations about it, but the Ways and Means and Appropriations process usually doesn't kick into full gear until after the second legislative funnel, John.
Yes,
because we're still dealing with a lot of policy,
mm-hmm.
So the policy committees are doing their thing and get those out. So as folks know that follows us, the first funnel is you got to have a bill out of committee in its house of origin. So a House file has to leave committee just to continue to be eligible. The second funnel is you got to get it through committee in the other chamber. So if you pass a bill out of the House, you ship it over to the Senate, that policy bill has to be out of the Senate committee to remain eligible. Okay, so we get past that funnel, and now you've sort of sifted through the pieces of policy which still have enough sort of juice left in them that they may become law.
Yeah.
But and the point behind all that is to limit the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
To here are the things left that we need to work on, which frees up sort of the energy to work on fiscal matters.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I would say the House this year continues to run a really, really large number of bills. So right now, there really is a lot at play because the House is running a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after you get past the second legislative funnel, a lot of those bills are going to die, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah,
I know not taking a stance on any particular bill, but you aren't judged. The measure of success in a legislature should not be how many bills they passed.
That's right. Yeah.
In fact,
I think you're right.
I might say it should be the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
So anyway,
and then another factor too, I think, if my memory serves correct, 2 weeks from today is the REC meeting.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
right around the corner.
That will determine the budget kind of framework. So
I have not heard that we're anticipating any big shift in that.
I haven't either.
So this will be the first REC, which is, as folks know, is the 3-member board which estimates how much tax revenue they have to work with.
Yeah.
And so the last one was in December. There's 3 a year. You got your October, December, and now March. So they've started basing their budget based on the December REC. This is how much money we think we're going to have. If that number goes down in the March REC, they have to, and it's not going to really matter because of how little they're spending, but they would have to shrink to come down under that new one.
Yes.
If it goes up, well, then there's just more money on the table. But it's always great to get, because that's a much clearer look at how things are really going. So the December REC was good. I suspect it will be relatively unchanged one way or the other there. Another thing, I guess, that's really interesting is the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll came out. And I think we should probably talk about this a little bit because these numbers had a lot of people talking in Iowa politics. We talked about a lot here. We didn't get to it in our last episode, John, but these numbers are even more optimistic for Republicans and Donald Trump than the ones in the ITR Foundation poll, which were also very optimistic.
Yes. Yep.
So, just in general, they haven't even released all of it yet, but what's your quick take on or your long take, whichever one you want to give, on the Des Moines Register Iowa poll?
Well, I was surprised, and I wasn't surprised that, looking at, I guess, starting with the presidential preference poll, I wasn't surprised that Trump was ahead, but it was a quite, and I don't have that number in front of me. But
I think it was 15. It was a 15-point margin.
Yeah, and that was quite significant. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of problems for President Biden, and and I seen some evidence of that within Super Tuesday, for example, I was talking with people from my home state, and which is fairly strong Democrat, but even
the strong's not the word.
That's
off the rails.
Yes,
is the descriptor we're looking for there, John.
But even it seemed like even in some areas where looking at the votes that Trump got in his primary versus Biden, Trump was even pulling ahead there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think things are at least right now. Of course, everything is fluid, as we know in politics, but I think it looks pretty good for the Republicans.
Right. There's a lot of things in here that kind of jumped off the page at me, and the top lines are always what get the most attention, which is, okay, Trump, Biden, here's the number. What was the final result in Iowa in 2020 between Trump and Biden? It was 8 points, 7 points.
I think, it was 8, I believe.
Yeah, it was 53-45, so it's +8. Well, in the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll, that's +15.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge shift.
Yeah, it is. That's significant.
The Des Moines Register doesn't publish their crosstabs, which, if you're not really steeped in polling, is where you can go in and say, okay, well, Democrats said this in the poll, or college-educated people said this. They may write it up in their narrative, but they don't publish all of those crosstabs. So it's a little harder to see where that shift comes from. Now, we published all that in the ITR Foundation poll, but that's here nor there. It does appear from at least the article on this poll is that even though Joe Biden's only at 33% in that poll, he's still getting almost all of the Democrats. So what it means to me is that there's a whole lot more people identifying as Republicans, and independents are just absolutely done.
Yes, yeah. Yep.
And you can look at that if you go in further into the approval rating things. Joe Biden's approval, right? Do you approve or disapprove of the job he's doing as president, was -40.
That's
69 disapprove of the job he's doing as president, 29 approve. That's -40. Now, what's interestingly, Donald Trump was +1 on whether you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of him. That is stunning.
It is, yeah.
And there's there's some other kind of smaller numbers in there, but one was Biden it had to do with his age. So it was his age a concern, his age somewhat of a concern, or is he too old to serve? His age is not a concern, 17%. So not very many. 25% of Iowans says, it's a little bit of a concern, which I think anyone that's intellectually honest has to at least.
Absolutely, yeah.
56% of Iowans said he is flat out too old to serve. So
that's very troubling for them.
Here's where much is said, much ink has been spilled about Donald Trump, right? And what people think of him. The fact remains, whatever you think of Donald Trump, the last 2 times that he has been on the ballot in Iowa have been very good years down ballot for Republicans. They have grown sizable majorities. The first time was in 2016 when they won the legislative trifecta for the first time in a generation. The second time was in 2020 when they grew their majorities again. So history would tell us that Donald Trump being on the ballot is a good thing for Iowa Republicans.
Yeah.
What we can see from numbers like this and the ITR Foundation poll is that the environment's even better at this point in 24 than it was in either of those last 2 cycles.
Yeah. And I'll just do a quick editorial because
this is an ITR Live editorial.
Yeah. I just from the State of the Union last night, and one is I think he's totally lost touch of reality. One, it was just a terrible performance because he just was up there yelling most of the time, including even yelling at the Supreme Court. And but basically he was saying that the economy is doing well and that crime is down. And the first half of his speech was basically Ukraine first. And, basically saying that if we don't act now, Putin's going to invade half of Europe. And, he was celebrating the expansion of NATO. And my sense is that people listening to that speech not only they just saw this, old man get off my lawn yelling constantly. I mean, which I thought was not very presidential. And then,
Right.
and then also, I mean, the economy is still a huge issue.
Right.
And for him to say that Bidenomics is working is just, he's lost.
Well, let's not pretend that he wrote a word of that.
That's
speech.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
The only words that he wrote are the ones that he misspoke off the teleprompter.
Yeah.
If they want to run on Bidenomics, they will lose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as Bill Clinton and James Carville famously said, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
They've got to figure out a message.
Yeah.
But if they want to figure out, if they want to plan a presidential election around the fact that the stock market's popped back up a little bit in the last few months, they will lose.
Yeah.
Because it ignores the reality of what Americans are facing with inflation and a stagnant economy.
Yeah. And a large part of his speech, of course, was this, and I hope people don't fall for it, but again, democracy is under assault.
Right.
And that was just a constant theme.
Right. No, and in fact, if they really want to talk about threats to democracy, we should talk about the United States Supreme Court saving the left from themselves.
Yes.
With their stupid ballot access garbage.
Yeah.
With a 9-0 decision.
I wanted to bring this up in pre-production. I forgot all about it, but I was watching Tucker Carlson last night because he had a live reaction.
You got your technical problems worked out?
Yeah, I
with
did.
The Tucker
Yes.
Carlson
Yeah.
Network?
Yeah. And his
so
staff is great.
Yeah.
And so they helped me resolve, and I was able to get back my access.
That's what I like to hear. Good customer service makes me feel a whole lot better about the Tucker Carlson Network.
But he played a clip from the Garland, the Attorney General, and he was down south somewhere giving a speech. It looked like in a church, and basically saying that the objective here was to that if the Democrats lose, then all voting rights are going away. And so he was saying we need to expand mail-in voting. We need to expand ballot drop boxes, and going down this whole list of things. And that was very concerning.
The sum of all of that, John, is that if you support the election laws as they exist in this country prior to COVID, you are an insurrectionist.
Yeah.
And then you hate democracy.
Yeah.
If you simply want to go back to election laws circa 2019, you hate democracy.
Yeah.
That there's a ballot drop box on every corner. There's ballot harvesting everywhere.
Yeah.
That if you don't support that, if you don't support rampant, unchecked ballot absentee balloting, all of those things, if you don't support it, you're restricting.
He was even criticizing voter ID, and I couldn't help but think, but what can you do nowadays without an ID?
Well, and let's not forget that the racism that comes out of Democrats when they talk about voter ID laws.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's just pure racism.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I thought I'd pick this out of the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll. So Democrats were just apoplectic that on a small change to election laws in Iowa that just passed, I think it passed the Iowa House, requiring mail-in ballots to be received by the auditor by the close of business the day before Election Day. Now, there's a reason for that, John, so they can actually count them. And so they can bring them in and make sure that they're received on time. So just one day earlier, which is another threat to democracy. What are the people of Iowa? So while Democrats are at the Capitol ranting and raving about how awful this bill is, Iowans 61-35 support that law.
Yeah.
Just like they support voter ID. So it's just these threats to democracy stuff. I think what most of that is, John, is trying to gin up their base.
It is.
It's good for donations. You can put it in the email. I'm sure Democrat fundraising, Biden fundraising's doing great today in the 24 hours after the State of the Union, and then it'll all go away. I don't think State of the Union addresses really matter much anymore.
No.
It used to be that was the thing. Maybe even more so in the age before cable news, but even during cable, it was a spectacle. You had to watch it.
Yeah.
It wasn't always just pure partisanship. There was some we're all in this together. And then you've got Nancy Pelosi tearing up speeches and it's
gotten to be a circus.
It's a campaign kickoff speech now. I suspect at some point that he shall from time to time give,
Mhm.
as the Constitution says, but
Yeah.
I wonder if it even if we're starting to see the beginning of the end of what those mean, like in the past. So,
Yeah.
a few other interesting things from the Iowa poll, John, before we move off of it. They did a several series of issue questions that I at least wanted to highlight. The biggest one, so gradually reduce the state's individual income tax until it is eliminated. So this is really not even something that's been talked about a lot this year, but the Register polled it. So we're talking about a phase out of Iowa's individual income tax, which
is in,
ITR has advocated for. And the left, again, says that this is probably a threat to democracy, but just radical. Iowans support that 62% to 30%, support phasing out the individual income tax.
Yeah. And if I think the breakdown was 74% of Republicans support it, 63% of independents, 42% of Democrats.
Yeah.
And it just sort of reflected our foundation poll with the strong support for the amendments.
And I want to circle back on this a little bit with the idea that we talked about on the last episode. And we talked about that, I think, more with regard to property tax. But whether you're talking about property taxes or income tax, from a political standpoint, that's gold. Those are winning issues.
Yes, yeah.
And Iowans want their taxes cut. It's plain as day in this.
Yeah.
They support legislative efforts to reduce their tax burden. And so the politics are great, especially, for those folks that are leading the charge on tax cuts. They should continue to do so. They should continue to do that confidently, that they will be rewarded by the voters of this state for those efforts. And I want to go a step further on this. Those that say, look, if there's an argument that this isn't the right year to eliminate, or this isn't the right year to do a property, okay, like we want to be smart about it.
That's right.
Policy, good policy should win. And I want to make sure I make it perfectly clear that I'm saying that. But the voices that are telling you not to cut income taxes, that needs to be taken with a giant grain of salt. You need to be listening more to the people of Iowa.
That's right.
Not the tax eaters.
Yeah.
You need to be listening. I'm almost getting to the point, John.
Yeah.
Legislators need to listen to Iowa taxpayers, not local government officials that want more and more and more. They need to not listen to local government officials that get mad when they have to spend the growth rate is smaller than it was before. Make no mistake, the people of this Iowa want to pay less in taxes. And listening to the tax eaters, whether it be at the state level or at the local government level, those voices need to be sidelined. And they need to get with the program that we have to do work to reduce Iowans' income tax and property tax burden.
That's absolutely right. I mean,
I told you I'd get there.
Yeah. That's you just laid out the gold standard of tax policy.
Took me a while. I had trouble getting warmed up.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
But I think you brought up a key point too, and that's just we have to do this carefully, and that's what they have done. I mean, that's what you guys did in 2018 when you shepherded through. At that time, was the biggest tax cut in state history, and now, when they did the flat tax, and all this has been done, with prudence, and so, there was another. I think it was the same guy who basically said that the flat tax was a threat to democracy, is basically predicting that Iowa's going to have a massive fiscal crisis in 10 years, but they've been saying that since 2018.
I want to speak to that a little bit, John, and we're kind of running over time and got to wrap up. This idea that we've touched on this before, but we talk with these legislative leaders and the governor's staff about taxes, about the things they're doing. And you may have heard us in the past talk about the runs. You ever heard that phrase? The runs are what is the expected revenue? What is the expected expenditures? And it's a big chart, much like if you've ever looked at the REC estimate. It breaks it down. Income taxes, inheritance taxes, starting at corporate income taxes, sales and use tax, and it breaks it down in the tax types, and you can look at it out. When we talk about the runs, it's what will this change in tax law do in these future out years? And right now, you're looking into, I think, fiscal year 29 if you're looking at a 5-year run, so it'd be fiscal year 25 on a. Okay, so now we're looking 5 to 6 years out. And those folks that we're talking to, we care to, they care. Individual legislators care. They want to see this work. They do not want to pass something that's not sustainable. And they are looking at those runs to make sure they balance. So they don't release every one of them because it's constantly changing.
That's right.
Every little, you change this little rate here and there, and it makes those things float around. So it's not something that necessarily gets published every time they make that change. But the fact remains is it works. Even if you go and look at the fiscal notes that are out on, which LSA publishes on those tax bills, they work. Yes, there's some big numbers coming off the top. The revenue will go down, but it goes down in a manner at which the state can continue to grow spending at the rate that they have historically been accustomed to. So anyway, I just like when we talk about the runs and talk about this idea that it's not sustainable and the whole state's going to come crashing in. Well, no, because they're planning for that.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not just, hey, tax cuts sound good, let's go to this arbitrary number.
Yeah.
It's because that's how much we think we can go right now and sustain it into the future.
That's right.
And so as we pivot to this, are you getting frustrated with me? I'm on a rant now.
No.
As we pivot in this legislative session to talk about tax policies, they may not do a bill at all. They may cut a little bit. They may cut a lot. They don't know exactly where it's going to land, but it's going to be at a number that they believe is sustainable. And the reason that we have continued to do tax bills year over year is because that number that they believe is sustainable keeps coming down.
Yes. Yep.
As we pass a tax bill in 2018, oh, wait, that works. Now we've got more money. Okay, well, let's lower it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we've got a whole lot more money. We better take a big swipe. We're going to go to 3.9%.
Yeah. And that's how the states that have done this successfully are doing this approach, And the two best examples are, I would say, Iowa and North Carolina.
Yeah.
That have gradually, responsibly lowered rates. And I just want to just quickly read a quote by Senator Jason Schultz, who I don't know if he chaired the subcommittee or was on it. But this was for the on the Senate side with the taxpayer amendments. But he basically says, and he's absolutely right, tax policy is affected by spending, and when you start seeing spending creeping up for annual, year after year, new good ideas, you can't have good tax policy. And he's absolutely right. I mean, spending is at the heart of whether it's property taxes, income taxes, it all comes back to spending.
Jason Schultz is one of my favorite legislators.
Yeah.
Has always been. Frankly, he's just one of my favorite people. And I don't know if you've ever met Senator Schultz.
I've only met him once.
He is he's just a positive, he's just a great guy. And when I hear Senator Schultz talking in those kind of terms, I think back to March of 2008 when Jason Schultz and myself both walked into the Secretary of State's office and filed our papers at the same time. And that was the first time I met him with a helpful staffer from Moines for tax relief that had helped us put it all together. So he was he understood that from the get-go.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've been Senator Schultz served in the Iowa House with me for I think 2 terms, maybe 3, and then he went over and ran for the Senate.
Okay.
And so just a wonderful taxpayer advocate and a great Iowan. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up because I know that we wanted to come around to that quote and I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that. So that all having been said, the people of Iowa want tax cuts. They want income tax cuts. They want property tax cuts, and they want legislators to deliver.
That's right.
So in the end, don't just trust the ITR Foundation poll. You can now trust the Des Moines Register Iowa poll at the same time. So, John, we are way out of time. Well, good. Thank you, folks. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, don't forget to join us on YouTube or Rumble, where you can see our smiling faces. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.